The standard psychological profile of a serial murderer is built around concealment. They operate in the shadows, meticulously scrubbing crime scenes and doing everything possible to distance their identities from their actions. But in late 1960s California, one killer operated differently. He actively sought an audience, a taxi driver named Paul Stine. Accompanying the fabric was a note from the killer, directly taunting the police and claiming responsibility for the crime. He repeatedly engaged in brazenly risky behavior. He used public payphones to call the police and report his own crimes shortly after committing them. During one daytime attack at 𝗭𝗶𝗶𝗵𝗁, he approached his victims wearing a theatrical black executioner's hood, featuring a stark white crosshair symbol. He left behind a trail of physical evidence, direct written communications, and even surviving witnesses. Yet, despite dropping dozens of indicators that should have signaled his identity, he completely vanished from the reach of the law. His attacks escalated rapidly across the Bay Area. The violence started on isolated, dark gravel turnoffs like Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. But within 10 months, he had moved his hunting ground directly into the dense urban streets of San Francisco. Along the way, he made mistakes. In 2 separate attacks, he failed to ensure his victims were dead. Michael Majo and Brian Hartnell both survived severe injuries and were able to provide investigators with specific physical descriptions of their attacker, including his height, weight, and voice. His most significant oversight occurred after murdering Paul Stine in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. 3 teenagers watched the crime unfold from a house directly across the street and clearly saw his face under a street lamp. Minutes later, 2 responding patrol officers actually stopped and spoke to a man walking away from the scene. These encounters allowed police to create detailed composite sketches. These sketches were printed on wanted posters and distributed widely. Authorities had a concrete profile: a white male, 35 to 45 years old, heavy build, with short brown hair and glasses. In criminal investigations, multiple surviving witnesses and a definitive composite sketch normally signal a closing window for a fugitive. Having a face and a description drastically narrows the suspect pool. Yet the manhunt stalled. With the physical hunt failing, the focus shifted to the documentary evidence. Over several years, the killer mailed over 20 letters to newspapers and authorities. He used a distinct, almost erratic handwriting style and signed his correspondence with a crossed circle symbol, calling himself the Zodiac. He used these letters for extortion. He demanded that publishers place his communications on the front page of their newspapers. If they refused, he threatened to escalate the violence, famously including a hand-drawn diagram for a bomb he claimed he would use to blow up a school bus. The Zodiac used cryptography to demand attention. He sent a 408-symbol cipher to 3 different papers, claiming his identity was hidden inside. Within days, a local couple cracked the code. They realized it was a 1-to-1 substitution cipher, and once they replaced the symbols with English letters, it revealed a disturbing manifesto about collecting slaves for the afterlife. By combining violent threats with intricate puzzles, the killer shifted the narrative. The focus moved away from the physical crime scenes and into an information war, forcing the media and the public into playing his game. Because of the massive amount of information he provided, the scale of the resulting investigation was enormous. The San Francisco Police Department alone looked into an estimated 2,500 potential suspects. One man emerged as the primary target, a former elementary school teacher named Arthur Lee Allen. Allen possessed heavy circumstantial ties to the crimes. He wore a Zodiac brand watch, happened to be in the same locations as several attacks, and even made troubling statements to friends about his desire to kill. But here, investigators encountered a technical stalemate. They had bloody fingerprints from Stine's cab, a partial DNA profile from the stamps on the letters, and extensive handwriting samples. When tested, every single piece of hard evidence consistently ruled Allen out. Lead detectives like Dave Toschi dedicated years to the case, filling entire filing cabinets with background checks and suspect interviews. But all that physical data continually yielded negative matches. The Zodiac left behind an overwhelming footprint of data, but the volume of evidence did not lead to a resolution. Instead, the investigation became buried in contradictions, with various forensic markers seemingly pointing in different directions. Then, the communication stopped. After a final letter in 1974, the Zodiac went completely silent. As the leads dried up and decades passed, the official police manhunt slowly stalled out, leaving the case files to gather dust in forensic archives. However, the investigation survived the original detectives. Because the killer left behind 3 unsolved cryptograms, the mystery migrated from police precincts to the internet, falling into the hands of a global network of amateur codebreakers and civilian researchers. In this visualization of the AZ Decrypt software, we can see how that civilian effort finally produced a result. In December 2020, an international team of programmers and mathematicians cracked the Zodiac's infamous 340-character cipher. By testing hundreds of thousands of key variations against the grid, they solved a puzzle that baffled the FBI for 51 years. But the decoded message offered no real answers. Spelled out in English were only more taunts. He boasted that he wasn't afraid of the gas chamber and claimed he was actively collecting more slaves for his afterlife. The cipher contained no name and no identifying information. The Zodiac case remains a prominent fixture in American true crime, precisely because of its abundance of data. Despite the fingerprints, the sketches, the handwriting, and the solved codes, the identity of the person behind them remains unknown. The evidence created a trail, but it never reached a destination.